I hold the belief that the significance or lack thereof in life is not my responsibility, but rather, it is my duty to make the most of the life I have been given. As Siddhartha once remarked, when one is on a quest, it is all too easy to become fixated on the object of their search, rendering them incapable of discovering or absorbing anything else. Their vision is clouded by the singular focus on the goal, which consumes their thoughts. To seek is to have a destination in mind, but to find is to be open, receptive, and free from a specific aim. You, a noble seeker, may indeed be so engrossed in your quest that you fail to notice the many things right in front of you. I have always maintained, and continue to uphold, the belief that regardless of the fortune or misfortune that befalls us, we have the power to imbue it with meaning and transform it into something valuable. While it may be of great importance to profound thinkers to scrutinize and even disdain the world, I believe that the true essence lies in loving the world, not in despising it, and in viewing ourselves, the world, and all beings with love, admiration, and respect. Many people resemble a falling leaf, drifting and twirling in the air, before finally fluttering to the ground. Yet, there are a select few who are akin to stars, following a distinct path, untouched by any wind, guided by their own inner compass. Each individual is more than just their own self. They embody a unique and significant point where the world's phenomena converge in a singular and never-to-be-repeated manner. This is why every person's story is important, eternal, and sacred. As long as one lives and fulfills the will of nature, they are extraordinary and deserving of contemplation. Within each person, the spirit becomes flesh, creation suffers, and the Redeemer is crucified. Learn to discern what should be taken seriously and laugh at the rest. If you harbor hatred towards someone, it is likely that you despise a part of yourself that you see in them. What does not belong to us does not trouble us. It is within our power to remain silent when others gossip, to smile kindly at people and institutions, to compensate for a lack of love for the world with more love in our personal lives, to be more dedicated in our work, to exhibit greater patience, and to forego the petty revenge that comes from mockery and criticism. All of these are within our reach. There is no reality beyond the one that resides within us. This is why so many lead an unreal existence, mistaking the images outside of themselves for reality and never allowing the inner world to assert itself. Words are often inadequate vessels for thoughts. Once expressed, they invariably become slightly altered, a bit distorted, a bit foolish. What could I possibly say to you that would hold value, other than the suggestion that perhaps you are searching too hard, and as a result, you may not find what you seek? I have been, and still am, a seeker, but I have stopped questioning the stars and books. Instead, I have started to listen to the lessons whispered by my own blood. Some of us believe that holding on is what makes us strong, but sometimes it is the act of letting go. I have come to understand that suffering, disappointment, and melancholy are not meant to torment us, to diminish us, or to strip us of our dignity, but rather to refine and transform us. Wisdom cannot be taught. When a wise person attempts to impart wisdom, it often sounds like nonsense to others. Knowledge can be shared, but wisdom cannot. It can be discovered, lived, and miracles can be performed through it, but it cannot be communicated or taught. Oh, love is not there to bring us happiness. I believe it exists to reveal to us how much we can endure. Those who are too indolent and comfortable to think for themselves and judge their own actions obey laws. Others feel their own laws within. Frequently, it is the most deserving individuals who cannot help but love those who bring them harm. I learned through my body and soul that it was essential to sin, to experience desire, to strive for possessions, and to know the depths of despair, in order to learn not to resist these experiences, but to embrace the world as it is, to love it, and to be content to be a part of it. Each individual has a singular true calling, to find their own path. Their mission is to uncover their unique destiny, not one imposed by others, and to live it out fully and decisively within themselves. Anything else is merely a semblance of existence, an attempt at division, a retreat to the ideals of the masses, conformity, and a fear of one's inner self. It is not my place to judge another's life. I must judge, choose, and reject, solely for myself alone. We are the sun and the moon, dear friend. We are the sea and the land. Our purpose is not to become each other, but to recognize one another, to learn to see the other and honor them for who they are, each the counterpart and complement of the other. Youth concludes when self-centeredness does. Maturity commences when one lives for others. Those who seek music over noise, joy over pleasure, soul over gold, creative work over business, passion over foolishness, find no home in our trivial world. Trees have always been the most profound preachers. I hold them in reverence when they live in communities and families, in forests and groves, and even more so when they stand alone. They are like solitary individuals, not like hermits who have withdrawn out of some weakness, but like great solitary figures, like Beethoven and Nietzsche. In their uppermost branches, the world rustles, their roots rest in infinity, but they do not lose themselves there. They strive with all the force of their lives for one thing only, to fulfill themselves according to their own laws, to build their own form, to represent themselves. Nothing is more sacred, nothing more exemplary than a beautiful, strong tree. When a tree is felled and exposes its naked death wound to the sun, one can read its entire history in the luminous, inscribed disk of its trunk, in the rings of its years, its scars, all the struggle, all the suffering, all the illness, all the happiness and prosperity are truly recorded. The lean years and the abundant years, the attacks within, the storms endured, and every young farm boy knows that the hardest and noblest wood has the narrowest rings, that high on the mountains and in constant danger, the most indestructible. The strongest, the ideal trees grow. Trees are sanctuaries. Whoever knows how to speak to them, whoever knows how to listen to them, can learn the truth. They do not preach knowledge and principles. They preach, undeterred by details, the ancient law of life. A tree says, "A kernel is hidden within me, a spark, a thought. I am life from eternal life. The attempt and the risk that the Eternal Mother took with me is unique. Unique the form and the veins of my skin. Unique the smallest play of leaves in my branches and the smallest scar on my bark. I was made the eternal in my smallest particular detail. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." People will go to any lengths, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. One does not achieve enlightenment by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Be still and listen. Have you acknowledged your madness and do you embrace it? Have you realized that all your foundations are deeply rooted in madness? Do you not wish to recognize your madness and welcome it with open arms? You sought to accept everything, so accept madness as well. Let the light of your madness illuminate, and it will suddenly enlighten you. Madness is not to be scorned or feared, but rather, it should be given life. If you aim to find your path, do not reject madness, for it constitutes a significant part of your nature. Rejoice in your ability to recognize it, for you will thus avoid falling prey to it. Madness is a unique manifestation of the spirit and is attached to all teachings and philosophies, but even more so to everyday life, as life itself is filled with folly and is fundamentally illogical. Humans strive for reason only to create rules for themselves. Life itself knows no rules. This is its mystery and its unspoken law. What you term knowledge is an attempt to impose comprehensibility on life. Every irritation we feel towards others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. I am not defined by what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become. A man who has not endured the inferno of his passions has never conquered them. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to ignite a light in the darkness of mere being. Understanding your own darkness is the most effective way to deal with the darkness in others. Loneliness does not stem from having no people around, but from being unable to share what feels important to oneself, or from holding views that others find unacceptable. The pendulum of the mind swings between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. There are as many nights as days, and each is just as long as the other. Even in a happy life, a year cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. It all hinges on how we perceive things, not on how things are in themselves. The smallest thing with meaning is worth more in life than the greatest thing without it. The first half of life is spent building a healthy ego. The second half is about looking inward and letting go of it. Where love reigns, there is no desire for power, and where power dominates, love is absent. One is the shadow of the other. I am amazed, disappointed, pleased with myself. I am troubled, depressed, ecstatic. I am all these things simultaneously and cannot sum them up. I am unable to determine ultimate value or worthlessness. I have no judgment about myself and my life. There is nothing I am entirely sure about. I have no firm convictions about anything really. I know only that I was born to exist, and it seems to me that I have been swept along. I exist on the foundation of something unknown to me. We should not pretend to understand the world solely through intellect. We grasp it just as much through feeling. Therefore, the intellect's judgment is at best only half of the truth and must, if it is honest, also recognize its own inadequacy. Mistakes, after all, are the building blocks of truth. If a person does not know what a thing is, it is at least a step forward in knowledge if they know what it is not. It is said that no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. It is my mind, with its repository of images, that gives the world color and sound, and that most real and rational certainty I can experience is, in its simplest form, an incredibly complex structure of mental images. Thus, in a certain sense, there is nothing that is directly experienced except the mind itself. Everything is mediated through the mind, translated, filtered, allegorized, twisted, even falsified by it. We are immersed in a cloud of ever-changing and ceaselessly shifting images. Any form of addiction is detrimental, regardless of whether the substance is alcohol, morphine, or idealism. Approximately a third of my cases are afflicted not by a clinically definable neurosis, but by the senselessness and emptiness of their lives. This can be characterized as the general neurosis of our era. Midlife is the juncture to relinquish our overly dominant ego and to ponder the deeper significance of human existence. Wholeness is not attained by severing a part of one's being, but by integrating opposing elements. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a hidden order. I have often observed individuals becoming neurotic when they settle for inadequate or incorrect answers to life's questions. They pursue status, marriage, reputation, external success, or wealth, and remain unhappy and neurotic even when they have achieved their goals. Such individuals are typically confined within too limited a spiritual horizon. Their lives lack sufficient content, sufficient meaning. If they're able to expand into more expansive personalities, the neurosis typically dissipates. As a child, I felt isolated, and I still do, because I perceive and allude to things that others seem to know nothing about, and for the most part, do not wish to know. The acceptance of oneself is the crux of the entire moral dilemma and the epitome of an entire worldview. Feeding the hungry, forgiving an insult, loving one's enemy in the name of Christ, these are undoubtedly great virtues. What we do for the least of our brethren, we do for Christ. But what if we were to discover that the least among them, the poorest of all beggars, the most powerless of all offenders, the very enemy, that these are within us, and that we ourselves are in need of our own kindness, that we ourselves are the enemy who must be loved? Typically, the Christian's attitude then shifts. There is no longer any mention of love or patience. We call the brother within us a wretch, and condemn and rage against ourselves. We conceal it from the world, refusing to admit that we have ever encountered this least among the lowly within ourselves. We are not made rich by what we possess, but by what we can do without. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as the end. All our knowledge begins with the senses, advances to the understanding, and culminates in reason. There is nothing higher than reason. Do not seek the favor of the multitude. It is seldom obtained by honest and lawful means. Instead, seek the testimony of a few, and do not count voices, but weigh them. Genius is the capacity to independently arrive at and comprehend concepts that would normally require instruction from another. Enlightenment is the emergence of man from his self-imposed immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to use one's understanding without guidance from another. Two things fill my mind with ever-growing wonder and awe. The more frequently and more intensely I reflect on them, the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. Morality is not properly the doctrine of how we may make ourselves happy, but how we may make ourselves worthy of happiness. Rules for happiness: something to do, someone to love, something to hope for, something. People naturally adhere most to doctrines that demand at least self-exertion and the least use of their own reason, and that can best accommodate their duties to their inclinations. Our age is the age of criticism, to which everything must be subjected. The sanctity of religion and the authority of legislation are considered by many as grounds for exemption from the scrutiny of this tribunal. But if they are exempted, they become the subjects of just suspicion and cannot claim sincere respect, which reason accords only to that which has withstood the test of a free and public examination. One who makes himself a worm cannot complain afterwards if people step on him. Skepticism is thus a resting place for human reason, where it can reflect upon its dogmatic wanderings and survey the region in which it finds itself, so that in the future it may be able to choose its path with more certainty. If the truth shall kill them, let them die. It was the duty of philosophy to destroy the illusions that had their origin in misconceptions. Whatever cherished hopes and valued expectations may be ruined by its explanations. Look closely. Beauty may be found in the small. Innocence is a splendid quality, yet it has the misfortune of not preserving well and being easily led astray. As nature has revealed from beneath this hard shell the seed for which she most tenderly cares, the inclination and calling to free thinking, this gradually influences the character of the people, who thereby become increasingly capable of handling freedom. Eventually, it affects the principles of government, which finds it advantageous to treat men, who are now more than machines, with dignity. For peace to prevail on earth, humanity must evolve into new beings who have learned to perceive the whole. In all judgments where we describe something as beautiful, we do not tolerate differing opinions. How then is perfection to be pursued? Where lies our hope? In education, and nothing else. Man must be disciplined, for he is inherently raw and wild. Out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made. Space and time are the frameworks within which the mind is compelled to construct its experience of reality. Thoughts without content are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind. Nothing is divine except what is in accordance with reason. A man stranded on a desert island would not adorn his hut or himself, nor would he seek flowers, much less plant them to adorn himself. It is only in society that he feels the need to be not merely a man, but a refined man of his kind. The beginning of civilization, for such do we judge him to be, who is both inclined and able to share his pleasure with others, and who is not content with an object unless he can enjoy it in common with others. Moreover, everyone expects and demands from everyone else this reference to universal communication of pleasure, as if it were from an original pact dictated by humanity itself. While beauty is limited, the sublime is limitless. Thus, the mind, in the presence of the sublime, attempting to imagine the unimaginable, experiences pain in the failure, but pleasure in contemplating the immensity of the attempt. In the depths of winter, I discovered within me an invincible summer. And that makes me happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there is something stronger, something better, pushing right back. For years, I've strived to live by everyone else's morals. I forced myself to live and look like everyone else. I said what was necessary to fit in, even when I felt apart. And after all of this, catastrophe struck. Now I wander among the ruins. I am lawless, torn apart, alone, and accepting of it, resigned to my singularity, to my infirmities. And I must rebuild a truth after having lived a life in a sort of lie. If absolute truth belongs to anyone in this world, it certainly does not belong to the person or party that claims to possess it. You will never find happiness if you continue to search for its constituents. You will never truly live if you are seeking the meaning of life. Blessed are the hearts that can bend. They shall never be broken. Parallel to the force of death and coercion, there exists an enormous force of persuasion known as culture. Few recognize that some individuals expend immense energy just to appear normal. Embrace fear. It will benefit you. Let it consume you. Stare blankly at ceilings. Bang your head against walls. Avoid people. Create art, and write. Embrace fear even more. Allow your mind to simply function. Stay indoors. Go out. It doesn't matter what you do, but remain terrified. You can't experience everything, so do your soul a poetic justice and simply experience yourself. Once you've seen the glow of happiness on the face of someone you love, you understand that a person's only calling is to ignite that light in the faces around them. The only way to navigate an unfree world is to become so utterly free that your very existence is an act of defiance. A man strives to earn money to be happy, dedicating his best efforts and years to earning that money. Happiness is forgotten. The means become the end. Find meaning. Differentiate melancholy from sadness. Take a walk. It doesn't need to be a romantic stroll in a park at the peak of spring, with flowers, scents, and poetic imagery transporting you to another world. It doesn't need to be a walk filled with life-changing revelations and the discovery of meanings unknown to others. Don't fear spending quality time alone. Find meaning, or don't, but still, set aside time and give it freely and exclusively to yourself. Choose privacy and solitude. It doesn't make you antisocial or cause you to reject the world, but you need to breathe and be. Evil in the world almost always stems from ignorance, and good intentions can cause as much harm as malice if they are not enlightened. People are more often good than bad, though that is not the question. They are more or less ignorant, and this is what we call vice or virtue. The most horrifying vice is the ignorance that believes it knows everything and thus authorizes itself to kill. The murderer's soul is blind, and there is no true goodness or love without the greatest possible clarity of vision. I still believe this world has no ultimate meaning, but I know that something within it does. That is humanity, because it is the only creature that insists on having a meaning. People rush to judge to avoid being judged themselves. In essence, whoever does violence to truth or its expression ultimately harms justice, even if they believe they are serving it. From this perspective, we will deny until the end that oppress is true because it is revolutionary. It is revolutionary only if it is true, and never otherwise. Man is the only creature who denies his own nature. You're anxious about achieving success to gain self-worth. Your soul is up for sale. You likely deceive yourself to convince yourself. Letting go is failing, isn't it? And you forget remarkably well, don't you? You forget that it takes incredible courage not only to try but also to give up gracefully. People are never convinced of your reasons, your sincerity, or the severity of your suffering until your death. As long as you live, your case is doubtful. You are only entitled to their skepticism. Beauty is unbearable. It plunges us into despair, offering us a fleeting glimpse of eternity that we wish to extend across all of time. We all carry within us places of exile, our crimes, our devastations. Our task is not to unleash them upon the world. Don't walk ahead of me. I may not follow. Don't walk behind me. I may not lead. Walk beside me. Simply be my friend. I do not believe in God, nor am I an atheist. There is no point in discussing ethics. I have seen people act immorally with great morality, and I observe daily that integrity needs no rules. An intellectual, yes, and I never deny it. An intellectual is someone whose mind watches itself. I like this because I am content to be both halves, the watcher and the watched. Can they be reconciled? This is a practical question. We must address it. I despise intelligence really means I cannot tolerate my doubts. In the world, it is to transform them within ourselves and others. We seldom confide in those who are better than us. Instead, we tend to avoid their company. More often, we confess to those who are like us and share our weaknesses. Thus, we do not wish to improve ourselves and be better, for we would first have to be found lacking. We merely desire to be pitied and encouraged in the path we have chosen. In short, we would like, at the same time, to cease being guilty and yet not make the effort to cleanse ourselves. Every time I hear a political speech or read those of our leaders, I am horrified to have, for years, heard nothing that sounded human. It is always the same words, telling the same lies, and the fact that people accept this, that the anger of the people has not destroyed these hollow clowns, strikes me as evidence that people do not value the way they are governed, that they gamble, yes, gamble, with a whole part of their life and their so-called vital interests. I see many people die because they judge that life is not worth living. I see others, paradoxically, giving their lives for the ideas or illusions that give them a reason to live. What is called a reason for living is also an excellent reason for dying. I therefore conclude that the meaning of life is the most pressing of questions. When I am dead, the principles that constitute me will still play their part in the universe and will be as useful in the grand scheme as when they formed this individual creature. The difference to the whole will be no greater between my being in a room and in the open air. One change is more significant to me than the other, but not more so to the universe. He is happy whose circumstances match his temperament, but he is more exceptional who can adapt his temperament to his circumstances. Beauty is not a quality inherent in things themselves. It exists only in the mind that contemplates them. and each mind perceives a different beauty. One person may even see deformity where another perceives beauty. Each individual should accept their own sentiment without attempting to dictate those of others. To seek real beauty or real deformity is as futile an inquiry as to claim to ascertain the real sweet or real bitter. Be a philosopher, but amidst all your philosophy, remain a human being. Heaven and hell imply two distinct types of people, the good and the wicked. Yet, the majority of humanity oscillates between vice and virtue. Men's perceptions of things are the product of their intellect alone. Their behavior is governed by their intellect, temperament, and passions. The identity we attribute to things is merely a fabricated one, created by the mind, not an inherent nature of what we're discussing. Broadly speaking, errors in religion are perilous. Those in philosophy are merely laughable. When men are most confident and arrogant, they are typically the most mistaken, allowing passion to cloud their judgment without the proper deliberation that could shield them from the most egregious absurdities. Epicurus's ancient questions remain unanswered. Is God willing to prevent evil but unable to do so? Then he is impotent. Is he able but unwilling? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then why does evil exist? If we pick up any volume of theology or scholastic metaphysics, for example, let us ask, does it contain any abstract reasoning about quantity or number? No. Does it contain any experimental reasoning about matters of fact or existence? No. Then it should be consigned to the flames, for it can contain nothing but sophistry and illusion. I dare say of the rest of humanity that they are nothing more than a bundle or collection of different perceptions that follow one another with incredible speed and are in constant flux and motion. The sweetest and least offensive path in life leads to the realms of science and knowledge, and whoever can either remove any obstacles in this path or open up any new vista should be considered a benefactor to humanity. It is absurd to believe that a deity possesses human emotions, and one of the basest of human desires, an insatiable craving for applause. And while the body is confined to one planet, crawling along it with pain and difficulty, the mind can instantly transport us to the most remote corners of the universe, or even beyond, into the boundless chaos where nature is thought to lie in total disarray. What has never been seen or heard or may yet be conceived, and is anything beyond the power of thought, except what involves an absolute contradiction. All sentiment is valid because sentiment refers to nothing beyond itself and is always real wherever a person is aware of it. But all conclusions of the intellect are not valid because they refer to something beyond themselves, namely real matters of fact, and are not always in accordance with that standard. In our reasoning about matters of fact, there is a full spectrum of confidence, ranging from the highest certainty to the lowest form of moral evidence. A wise person, therefore, adjusts their belief to the evidence at hand. Would a sensible man chase after every foolish story of hobgoblins or fairies, and meticulously scrutinize the evidence? I have never known anyone who examined and pondered over nonsense who did not end up believing it by the conclusion of their inquiries. We make allowances for a certain level of selfishness in people, recognizing that it is an integral part of human nature, embedded in our very being and constitution. With this understanding, we temper those feelings of blame that so readily arise when faced with opposition. Nothing seems more astonishing to those who observe human affairs with a philosophical perspective than the ease with which the many are controlled by the few, and the unquestioning obedience with which individuals surrender their own thoughts and passions to those of their leaders. When we investigate how this phenomenon occurs, we discover that, as force is always on the side of the governed, the governors have nothing but opinion to sustain them. Thus, it is opinion alone upon which government is founded, and this principle applies to the most authoritarian and military regimes as well as to the most liberal and democratic ones. The soldier of Egypt or the emperor of Rome might have driven their harmless subjects like beasts against their will, but they had to lead their Mamelukes or Praetorian guards as men, through their opinions. For my part, when I delve deeply into what I call myself, I invariably encounter some specific perception or another, of heat or cold, light or darkness, love or hatred, pain or pleasure. I never find myself without a perception, and I never observe anything beyond the perception itself. If anyone, after serious and impartial reflection, believes they have a different conception of themselves, I must admit that I can no longer engage in a debate with them. All I can concede is that they may be just as right as I am, and that we are fundamentally different in this respect. They may perhaps perceive something simple and continuous that they call themselves, even though I am certain that no such entity exists within me.
Thank you for listening, everyone. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to receive great videos every day from the Quotes of Stoic channel. Goodbye and see you again.